Welcome back, Honors. So we're gonna get right back into all the Egyptian stuff that we've been talking about. So far we talked about like the basics of keeping, like the basics of Egypt, its geography, its climate, the symbols of its uniting of its upper and lower kingdoms, its centralized government, And we also began talking about the 7 different time periods and how the early on archaic period was like the unification of the 2 kingdoms, and the old kingdom saw the construction of some of the earliest pyramids, also saw the consolidation of the kingdoms into the nome system by Djoser, right? Don't forget that, right? So like all kinds of stuff like that, right? Now, we stopped with the first intermediate period. And remember, really, really quickly, what does it mean? What part of that word means bad? Good job, Quan. That's right. The intermediate part of it, right? So because every single prosperous era kingdom is called what? That a boy, Jack. That's right. Kingdom. So anyway, but this right here, this is how we know that there was a separation between the upper and lower kingdoms during the first intermediate period, is a lot of their written records. And this is actually from one of the inside walls of one of the, of Temple of Ramses II. So it actually shows the, written on the walls actually shows the, Civil War itself. And this right here is what a common Egyptian soldier would wear. So I always think this is just really, really cool to look at because their dress, attire, armor, and battle use was actually very, very different. And this is right here is actually a Nubian, like I said, one of their archers. And then right here, shows some of their modern military technology. So we've got things like chariots, horses, domesticated animals, things like that. If they have like a cheetah running around with them, I'm not gonna lie, that's probably one of the coolest freaking things I've ever heard in my entire life. So anyway, but keep going though. So we got the Middle Kingdom coming up next, like a rebirth of intelligence and government. Oh, good stuff, right? But that was in the 11th and 12th dynasties. Now, as we remember, that's how we keep track of Egyptian dynasties, is not through name, but through number. All right, so now Senseret, very important guy, go ahead and star him, very important, had the biggest impact as pharaoh during the Middle Kingdom because he worked to establish Osiris as one of the chief gods to explain the Nile and the authority of the pharaoh. But his biggest, his best, his pinnacle of government reforms has to do with the fact that he created the very first bureaucratic system. All right, we still use bureaucratic systems. Europe was in the Dark Ages and wasn't using bureaucratic systems during the Middle Ages. Rome used a bureaucratic system. The Renaissance governments used bureaucratic systems. Notice what I'm saying. Prosperity is often defined by the ability for government to work in unison and flawlessly and have a flow and an essence and all of these things. And that's what a bureaucratic system does, right? So a bureaucratic system is the idea of a multifaceted, multi-level government. The best way to think about it, and I'll show you a depiction of it tomorrow, the best way to think about it is actually a lot like a pyramid, right? So that has to do with the fact that who's up top? Boom, Pharaoh is up top, right? And beneath him were his priests and royal advisors. And beneath him, notice I said advisors. And then like as we go down, then there were the scribes. And as we go down and down and down, then there are all the regular people down at the bottom. And then the slaves below them. The bureaucratic system not only separated social classes, but it made government work more effective. Because now the pharaoh deals directly with one group of people, and then those group of people deal with the next level, and then that level deals with the next level. It's a system of efficiency, right? So we have one at school as well. We have Miss Whipkey up here, and then we have Miss Creasy right here, and then we have our vice principals like Mr. Wallace and Mrs. Clinton, right, and Mrs. Wilkinson, and then we have the teachers, and then we have like, you know, like Jesse and Butch, and then we have like basically every other human being on the planet, and then you got you guys like down here. All right, so anyway, now, but let's keep going. Now, let's take a break from all this time stuff for a second, right? Because here's the thing. We got to discuss really quick because everybody's like, wait a minute, back it up. If everybody thinks that the pharaoh is an extension of the theocratic government, if everybody thinks that the pharaoh is a god himself, then how did people deal with the ideas of these intermediate kingdoms at all? How did they deal, or excuse me, that was a contradiction, the ideas of the intermediate periods at all? Like, how is that possible? Wouldn't people have questions? Well, they did, and they actually came up with a concept to actually try and bring balance to that whole argument to keep their theocratic government and also explain how the world works. Some of you have seen this symbol of Maat before. Maat. Maat is the harmony that keeps justice and truth. And it is symbolized by this woman who has a balanced pair of eagle-like wings, right? Because the people began to depend on the pharaoh as a god and to keep the balance of Maat. So, people believed in ethical maintenance of Maat and kept everyone's life happy. It's a lot like karma, okay? So, for example, let's say, hypothetically, let's talk about Maat and the pharaoh, right? So, let's say that the people were really, really super upset because Mr. Terry is just like, oh my God, he's such a jerk, and he's like giving us too much work, and he won't let us write in this kind of color, and he's being ridiculous. And then you've got somebody in my class, right, in my honors class, you got Sean Martin, right? And Sean Martin stands up and is like, this is garbage, and he leads a revolution against me and overthrows me and becomes the new ruler of the classroom, right? Well, here's the thing, though. To bring balance to the idea of that, I violated Maat by being mean to my subjects, right? So if the pharaoh lied or was unjust to his people, he was overthrown to usher in a new dynasty, right? So, boom! That's a huge connection, right? So Egyptians also, though, another thing about their life, is what we're talking about now, is just like life in ancient Egypt. They broke their calendar into 3 separate seasons, right? Their 3 separate seasons have to do with the rainy season, the draining season, and the draining season, and the hardy season. Excuse me. Let's start over. Let's breathe a little bit. All right? How you feel? You good? I hope you're enjoying your day off. Now, anyway, so the flood season was from June to September, right? When the Nile would overflow its banks and actually rise up and go into the harvesting areas, and then eventually during the draining season from October to February, it would all recede. And as it would recede, the Egyptians would begin to plant in the newly revitalized, silt-ridden soil, right? So, and then from March to April was their harvest season. Now, really, really quickly, again, tell me, pop quiz, if you're a real stud, you'll be able to answer this question. What Greek historian said that Egyptians had such an easy time planting and it was not fair? Good job, Susie. His name was Herodotus, right? Don't forget that guy. Go back into your notes and circle Herodotus because he's going to come up later, all right? Anyway, and then also, really, really fast, somebody tell me the difference in how their government and their religion viewed their river by versus the Mesopotamians. No one. Really? No one? No one's good. Good job. Carly. Yeah, that's it. All right, so good job, Carly. That's exactly right. Mesopotamians feared their river, whereas the Egyptians praised their river, right? It's very, very different geographically. And this is going to affect everything. It affects how they view heaven, affects their religion, affects all kinds of stuff, right? So anyway, now, keep going forward, though. There are only 2 constants in Egyptian life. Death and taxes, right? So there was an efficient taxation system under the bureaucratic government in Egypt that was set up by Sinseret. Don't forget that. Now, the ancient Egyptians had to pay taxes in the form of their harvests, right? Because back during the ancient Egyptian time, they didn't have a standard form of currency. So one of the only ways that you could actually pay taxes was through your harvests, right? So farmers were required to give the government a certain amount of grain, and a poor season resulted in certain things like a beating. So, don't plant good, all right? Don't mess that stuff up. You hear that? Gingrich, huh? You hear that? Yeah. Crane, you hear that? You better plant something good. All right, anyway, now, so a poor season result in the beating, and that anything could be, used as a tax. Excuse me, cattle, anything. I mean, most of it was measured, though, in goods that you could produce. And it's funny because this is actually kind of one of the early forms of capitalism when you really, really think about it. So, anyway, keep going, though. Now, the Egyptian family marriage was a business arrangement as far as many Egyptian families were concerned. Couples were arranged based on which family, what each family would gain. So, marriages in Egypt were a lot like many Eastern cultures, right? This is you have to understand, Egypt and these ancient cultures, why we talk about them so specifically, is because they're the big, they're the original marker. They're the impression, the mold of a civilization, right? And then eventually, that mold will be broken into 2 separate forms, an Eastern style and a Western style one, right? So, an Eastern style aspect of the Egyptian family has to do with the fact that they actually used arranged marriages. You did not marry for, quote-unquote, love, even though, ironically enough, early Western marriages were pretty much the same exact way. Now, anyway, women, this is one of the coolest things about Egyptian standards, is that they were actually very progressive when it came to roles of the sexes in a family life, right? So women could actually divorce if they so chose. Men, however, could also keep several wives, or these things called concubines, right? And a concubine had a concubine is a woman that stays at that woman that is at your home that a man is allowed to but it's not his wife. All right, so and then it's just his wife was his main. Okay, let me back it up a little bit. they would usually, Egyptian families would have like a main wife, like a mother figure, right? And that mother figure was actually in charge of one huge aspect, and it was educating children, right? So anyway, couples were expected to have children as fast as possible, mainly because boys carried the family line and performed burial rites for their parents, and also girls helped keep the home along with their mother. All Egyptian children were taught several different subjects, like writing and math, and the goal was for most common children was to become a scribe, which is the highest that they could achieve job-wise. And how is this a little bit different again for Egypt life versus Mesopotamian life? Anybody? Waiting? Good job, Rudica. That's right. Mesopotamians, you had to be wealthy male and pay to go to school to become a scribe, whereas Egyptians, you could actually become one later on. Now, one other little funny thing about this right here, Egyptian children did not wear clothes until they hit around the age of puberty. So anyway, now, a little weird, right? All right, anyway, so, but continuing forward, this right here, this is the design of an Egyptian home, right? This is the design of an Egyptian home. Now, obviously, this is a wealthy family. And again, everything about Egypt's geography affects their lives, right? It affects the way that they do everything, okay? So, we are going to stop right here. We are going to pick up with Egyptian life tomorrow because I want to talk about this picture. And the first question I'm going to ask you in your warm-up tomorrow is, how do you think the design of a wealthy Egyptian home reflected the aspects of their geography? All right? So anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening. So remember, your notes tonight go from the Middle Kingdom all the way up to like Maat principles and life during ancient Egypt. Because other than this, all I really need to talk about is like designs of poor people's homes, and then also like things they wore and the routines they had and stuff like that. So anyway, but we're going to keep going from here tomorrow. So can't wait to see y'all then. Have a good evening.